When California became the 31st state on September 9th, 1850, it took 6 weeks for news to reach California when the steamship the Oregon arrived in San Francisco on October 18th, 1850. Sacramento will receive the news the next morning on the 19th when the steamboat the New World arrived at the banks of Sacramento at the waterfront in what is today Old Sacramento. Sacramento would celebrate statehood that day, all just before the first cases of cholera were reported in what would become a major epidemic in our city. Now, there were other cases of epidemics throughout California around this time, and you could also say that it was a pandemic happening in North America. It is cholera that would cause a lot of people to leave the east coast of the United States and come to California during the gold rush. In the first history of Sacramento, written by Dr. John Frederick Morse in 1854, he wrote actually that the steamer that brought the news of statehood to Sacramento, the New World, also brought the person that would stumble off the boat and bring cholera to our city. However, cholera had been in the city prior. On October 20th, 1850, however, the first cases of cholera broke out truly in our city, with Dr. Thomas Logan reporting 7 cases of cholera to the city council on October 24th. But the council and the local newspapers here in Sacramento tried to dissuade people from thinking it was a concern. A few days later, Logan brought the issue of an impending cholera epidemic again to the city council, and his concern was taken a bit more seriously. Hospitals were quickly formed throughout the city. Dr. John Frederick Morse, who would later write that history of Sacramento, would open a hospital at K and 3rd Streets. Now, you might be wondering, how does this story fit into Sutter's Fort, especially since the fort was largely abandoned by this point? Well, the southeast bastion of Sutter's Fort and the rooms next to it, now the bastion that once housed the fort's jail in the basement and the cannons above, became the city hospital at this time. It became one of the major hospitals during this epidemic because this hospital was far away from much of the city, and Dr. Robert Stransbury was the head doctor at the fort. After 20 days, around 800 people died of cholera. That's roughly 10% of Sacramento's population at this time. And the city was almost deserted by the time the epidemic ended, somewhere around November 10th, 1850, just 20 days. The cholera victims, about 800 people, were buried in the New Helvetia Cemetery at J and 31st Streets, where Miwok Middle School is today. In 1956, that mass grave was removed from the cemetery and relocated to the Old City Cemetery off of Broadway in Sacramento. At a time when germ theory wasn't fully developed, it is the doctors that helped make sure this epidemic didn't become much worse. There were only 24 practicing doctors in Sacramento at this time. Dr. Morse, who would become a prominent member in Sacramento after the epidemic, would become editor of Sacramento's first daily newspaper in March 1851, the Sacramento Daily Union. Dr. Thomas Logan, that individual who would bring this initial concern about an epidemic to the city council, would go on to be the founder of California's State Board of Health in 1870. Now, Dr. Stransbury, here at Sutter's Fort, however, was one of 17 doctors out of the 24 doctors in this city that would pass away of cholera during this epidemic.